Okay, here we go. So this is the process, and I'll go through it kind of quickly because most of us don't need to do it today. But before the meat is salted, it first needs to be thoroughly washed with water. The meat must be soaked in water for approximately a half hour, and the water must completely cover the meat. So just bear in mind when you're talking about the prices of kosher meat, one of the steps that, again, people forget, they remember that you need a sheikha to shecht it, but the production line, chickens, for example, so the production line actually has a whole salting mechanism built into it so that the chickens actually sit in water and sit in salt. It's actually a whole fascinating production line. So and from the moment the meat is goes into water until it's salted, until it goes out the other end of the line, because it's a production line, will be the halachic requirements. So they actually designed a special machine that so each it has buckets, and in each bucket is a few chickens, and then the buckets dip into water. And then it continues moving at a very slow pace. You know, if it wants to be slow, then it zigzags up and down, and then it comes out. And then they add salt. And then it gets washed once and washed again. So there's actually a whole conveyor belt that takes approximately, I think it's 30 minutes in order for the meat for the chicken to actually be salted and all. And you need, again, that's part of the job of a mashgiach there to ensure that all the meat is being salted correctly. So let's see the steps. Number one, it needs to be soaked. Where actual blood is visible on the meat, it must be rubbed off in the water in which it was soaked and removed. Similarly, when salting chicken, you need to thoroughly rub the place where the cut was made when it was shafted. Similarly, on the inside of the animal where actual blood is visible, any blood needs to be rubbed away. Occasionally, meat or fowl may have a blood clot due to a wound. This place must be cut off and removed before the meat is soaked. If the water is very cold, it must be first set in warm place to reduce the coldness before the meat is soaked in it, meaning the water can't be too cold, because if the water is very cold, the meat will harden and the blood won't come out. It will kind of like freeze. So that will stop the salting. Now, if you forgot and allowed the meat to soak in water for 24 hours, then both the meat and the vessel become non-kosher, because by letting the meat sit for 24 hours in water, you've actually, instead of getting the blood out, you've actually caused the blood to both be stuck inside of the meat and for the taste of the blood to go into your dish. So now both your dish and the chicken would be not kosher. So it's quite an interesting phenomenon that part of the kashering process of chicken becoming kosher is that you're dealing with kosher and non-kosher mixed together. The blood is not kosher, the chicken is kosher. You need to extract one from the other without causing that what becomes kosher stays kosher and what's not kosher but doesn't affect what is kosher. If you soak liver in water for 24 hours, you would have to ask a rabbi what to do then. Okay, on the day of Erev Shabbos, when there's very little time, or when you're pressed for time, it's sufficient to rub the meat well in water and let it soak for a short while in water. And if there's no redness in the water, you can salt it. So he says preferably the meat should sit for half an hour, but if you're pressed for time, then you don't need that half an hour as long as you know the water is rubbed off well. So yeah, this could be an example of where sometimes in Israel, for example, there are many different kashrus agencies, and some of them may be known to have a higher standard than the other. So this would possibly be an example where the one agency would insist on everything sitting for 30 minutes, causing them the meat to be more expensive because it's a slower process. And the other agency would say, no, under press times you could do less. So there's always the question of, do you lower the bar to make it more accessible, or do you keep the bar high and keep it less accessible? And then it could also depend on your clientele. Just like in hygiene, some people will want to pay more for a cleaner product, and some people will rather pay less for a not as high level product. Like, I guess, for example, I don't know, if you compare prices of a product at Woolworths over Pick and Pay, some people will say, no, my budget, I want to just get the cheapest one, even though it's not going to be the same quality. Somebody else will say, no, I want a higher quality product, even though it will cost more. And the same thing exists in the kashrus world of kosher. Sometimes a choice needs to be made. Are we going to keep this on the highest level, or we're going to lower it to make it more accessible. And then some of your clientele will want it one way, like a Woolworths product, and another clientele another way. So it's just giving you a little bit of an insight into the, I guess, the intricacy of the world of kosher certification. Okay. If you are soaking, if after soaking one piece was cut into two, you must wash the place where the cutting was done, because basically wherever you cut it, you'll see blood. Wherever it wasn't cut, so we're hoping that the blood will extract it out of there. Sorry, the salt will extract the blood out of there. The cut was done very thoroughly because of the blood that's there. Meat that is frozen must be thawed out before it is salted, but it may not be placed near a heated oven. So you need to get it to defrost, but if it gets too hot, then it's going to get cooked in the blood, and then again it won't become kosher. I see we've gone overtime. Apologies for that. And please God, tomorrow we will continue with the laws of salting. There's quite a lot of them, but we'll try to go through them rather quickly since most of us are not doing this in our kitchens today. Thanks so much for joining me, and wishing you a wonderful evening.